I took my family on a tour right before Halloween, and my mother asked me a very easy question, but she's like, why Streets of Sin? What the hell? Well, it's a very fitting name because literally, as we walk the streets tonight, each street is just littered with sin in every single direction. And the stories that I chose for you tonight are just embedded with mounds and mounds of sin. Now, I'm calling this little route, so anytime I do 7 p.m. tour, we go in a different direction. You'll find most groups head this way. But I thought of a need for these stories to be shared that go in this direction. And I'm calling this little route the Way of the Wicked Tour. And it is pretty wild and bizarre. So I'm super excited to share these stories that I put together for you. And I've been practicing for many months, and we're gonna have a really good night tonight. So this is where I always gonna go around the room, some little rules that everybody needs to know before you get this land for the King of France. And this is where he stuck a cross right in the middle of this land that we now call Jackson Square. Now, when he claims this land for the King of France is a little pup boy, 8 years old, King Louis XV. He wasn't running shit. His Uncle Philip was the Duke d'Orleans. Now, Uncle Phil needs a call out to everybody. He needs guys. He's like, guys, let's go. Who wants to go? Free land, free housing, and nobody took the bait, right? So Uncle Phil will need help, and he will hire a man named John Law. Now, John Law's a Scottish gambler. He's a shady as shit dude, but he shows up to France. He's like, bro, you didn't need me. Got all the guys here. And John Law and his crew will start taking the rapists, the convicts, the murderers, the worst of the worst in the French jails. And these are the guys that they send here to start laying the foundations. Now, the second us guys get anywhere, we look around, 20 seconds, we're like, we need ladies. We need some feminine energy to come help, right? And that's when they're like, we got this covered too, check it out. They will start kidnapping prostitutes from the streets of Paris, France. They will load all the hospitals and mental institutions of all the ladies in France. And these are the gals that they send here. So, over 300 years ago, all this debauchery, all this crazy energy, and if you've been to Bourbon Street or walked around last night, or if anybody been here for a little bit, nothing's changed, right? You went to college here. We keep all this debauchery very much intact, right? But the reason I like to bring this up in my introductions, all the stories I'm going to share with you tonight, they happen across and around from the places as they looked in the 1700s, the 1800s, the early 1900s. We have captured all this emotional resonance, all this dark, twisted spirit, stuck every single brick, nail, piece of wood, steel, you name it. That's why we made the claim for being so effed up and haunted. So I always like to tell my skeptic friends, maybe I believe in this movie nonsense I'm going to share with you tonight, or you're a big nerd when it comes to history like myself, have an open mind, take lots of pictures, ask me lots of questions. Know that when you go back to your Airbnb later, or your hotel room, and you're standing in the room all by yourself, and the TV comes on without the remote, you're like, fuck, or you get the goosebumps or cold spots. That's a ghost that followed you back. I'm just joking. They just had a good time with Team Crystal. Now, I'm referred to us as a team. I want us to be very safe tonight, my friends, okay? It's a Sunday. We've got beautiful weather. People have been drinking all day, and they do like to drive sometimes. So just check both ways when we cross streets. I'm always going to stop the traffic for our little group, but just look both ways anyway. I'm asking this group to do one or two things, and they're going to give every single story, even come really close to the curb. I'll push back. You're good. Long enough. This is where you take all your wedding pictures before going to get married in the beautiful St. Louis Cathedral, right? What people don't know is this is where all the French punishments were handed out, right? During the time of the French from 1718 to 1762, if you effed around and messed up, this is where you would receive one of 5 punishments. And it was exactly what was taking place in France during this time. Now, our first executioner, all right, first punishment man was a man named Louis Congo. Now, he was a free man of color, okay? So this guy and his wife came over as slaves in 1724. The second they get here, they're like, we need an executioner. Like, what about you? You want the job? They freed him and gave him a piece of farmland and a house. Now, it sounds like, okay, I'm not a slave anymore. It is good. At the same time, being an executioner was not a very good position. You were feared by anybody in town, right? If you saw Louis Congo walking on that side of the street, you're like, oh, fuck, maybe over here, okay? They were never treated like respect throughout all of history, right? They were always feared by the locals. Now, he will be given sole power by King Louis XV to do 5 punishments. Whipping, branding, right? You had amputations, you had hanging, and you had breaking of the wheel. This is what would take place right here in this piece of land. Now, this was entertainment. There was no NFL games, baseball games, boxing matches, all right? So if we heard Louis Congo was about to hang somebody for effing around or breaking the wheel, if we were a family, we'd show up here hours in advance, we'd get a spot. If we had children, this is something that you'd bring to show them, hey, better behave, or this is what's going to happen to you one day. It was also a morality play in the sense that if you paid for your sins by Louis Congo or whoever was executioner, you, but from the Catholic side, would be sent to heaven. If you were, hung to death or broke out the wheel or amputated, got your head cut off, now you're free to go to heaven. You paid for your sin. So big kind of morality play here. Now, so a few things that would happen. So let's say, for instance, somebody stabbed somebody or tried to stab somebody with a knife, Louis Congo would cut off that hand, usually of whatever was holding the knife. Maybe you committed adultery, you cheated on your wife or husband. This was a big, big no-no back in the day. You would receive an A, branding. Maybe you tried to murder somebody. That's when you would be hung here. Now, anytime you read about the hangings here in Plaza de Armas, which is now Jackson Square, they would leave these bodies up for weeks. They would let nature take its course and let the body fall. And again, it was a big reminder. You're going to church, you'd walk around by this dead body every day, like, shit, I better stay in line. And it did work. Very, very rare do you have more than 3-4 executions every year during this time, right? So it did keep people in check. Now, before we go to our first long story of the night, I like to talk about breaking in the wheel because it's a really, really bizarre punishment, and it's one that not many people know about. And beyond being burned at the stake, this is the one I think is the worst. And burning at the stake never took place here, but breaking of the wheel did, and that was the worst. Can everybody hear me? I'm just joking. That was not a grenade launcher. It was not. Namaste. Love, love, love. All right, so breaking of the wheel. You got really, really bad. Louis Congo, you come here early. And what they would do with the wheel, so they bring pretty much a big mound or a scaffold, and the condemned would be tied out by each limb, right? And what they would do is they'd put these little 6-inch to 1-foot turrets under each bone, right? So under the elbow, the knee. And once you're set up here, that's when Louis Congo would walk around with a big hammer or a club. Now, when you read about breaking the wheel, they always hacked away at the knees first. And these hacks would take up to a minute. They're just wailing away on each joint till it's just busted up. You had bones splintered. They go to the next knee, then the elbows. From the elbows, you go to the rib cage. Now, after the rib cage, that's where it gets wild. Because at this time, most executioners are running off of pure adrenaline. And the last big joint to be crushed is always the neck. At this point, when studying breaking the wheel, most of these executioners miss. And that's when your face is just blasted. Now, if you aren't dead at this point, you're going to wish you were. Because that's when they break out the wheel. And it's usually a big wagon wheel. And what they do with the condemned that just got completely destroyed by a club or a hammer is they wheel them into the spokes, right? So at this point, any person that is receiving this punishment looks like a jacked up sea monster. You have skin, blood, probably making a few noises, not good. After they put you into this wheel and tie you up, that's when they set you on a big post. These posts, when dealing with breaking the wheel, are usually 8 to 12 feet high. Sometimes they set you face flat, or sometimes you'd be looking just like this. And after that, see you later. Let nature take its course. You have insects, bugs, animals, you name it. Again, you wish you were dead, and then let that body sit out here for however long they could. Now, Louis Congo, we have records of him doing these punishments from 1725 to 1738. After that, we lose track of this man. Now, he was also doling out these punishments to a lot of runaway slaves, a lot of Native Americans. So this was a big, big mess up job. A lot of the black folks that were free people of color, like, what the F, Louis Congo, why are you doing this to your people? So again, it was a big, big kind of always messed with him and his wife. People would follow him to their farms. They're like, why are you doing this shit? But he took his job seriously, and he did all of these punishments for over a decade. Now, from 1740 to about 1752, we know non-executions take place here. So again, it really did keep people in check. I'm not saying, hey, let's bring it back, what would take place, but these punishments made people behave here in the city of New Orleans. Now, as we stroll the streets tonight and I share these stories, these are the punishments that lots of our folks would be dealt as we kind of jump from story to story. And what I'm going to kind of bring up as we kind of go with this journey tonight is the kind of the dichotomy of good and evil. Every single story is going to have this kind of good element and this crazy, crazy evil element, the good and bad. And then I'll point it out as we go, and I'm ready to get started. What questions do you have for me? Louis Congo or French punishments? Okay, awesome. I have an awesome book list, and I'm going to share it with my fellow nerds. One of my favorite books I've read in regards to this subject matter is a book called The Last Executioner. It was a diary of a German executioner during the time of the 1600s. An author found his diary, and reading about that shit, holy, it's nuts. So anyway, really great book. Most of these executioners, not Louis Congo, but a lot of them throughout history, it was kind of like part of the family. The grandparents, the great-parents, everybody was an executioner. At an early age, if you had a father who was an executioner, he'd teach you at the age of 10, 11, 12, how to start chopping away at dogs, cats' heads, nuts, shit. Just imagine the psychology that would be dealt with to these human beings. Nuts. Everybody good? Let's go around the corner. We're going to do our first true crime story of the night. It's a jacked up one. It's our most recent tale. 2006, and I'm gonna share the story of Zach and Addie with everybody. Let's do it. Yeah, I can trust you again. Just don't walk too fast without me, all right? Yeah, just lead the way right here. There you go. Good. You good? Everybody see it across the street? Got the parking lot. I'm gonna bring the top of that building in play in this first story. And this first story begins 2005. When a gentleman named Zach, he shows up here to New Orleans. Now, Zach has lived here in the past, but he was a two-time Iraqi war veteran. He's got a bad case of PTSD, but all in all, this guy's a pretty good dude. And shortly after moving here in 2005, he immediately gets a job at Bouffers. Now, Bouffers is still here to this day. It's on the edge of the French Quarter in this direction. And he's working as a little bar back. And one night working at Bouffers, a little girl will stroll into Bouffers and he falls in love. And her name is Addie. And he's like, oh shit. They hit it off immediately, and these two are having the best summer of 2005. Now, a bit of an odd couple at this point. Zach is close to 6'10", and Addie is barely on the cusp of 5 foot. And he's a bar guy, she's a stripper, so pretty wild little couple. They work at nights, they sleep all day, and they're having a really good time. Well, in August of 2005, that's when a bad storm hits our city. Hurricane Katrina, boom, devastates New Orleans, remember, just like it was yesterday. Now, have any of y'all ever evacuated for a storm? Okay, a few of y'all shaking y'all's heads, okay? If you haven't, it's a miserable experience, right? My friends can vouch. What could take you an hour drive is now gonna take you 25 hours, okay? 2 days. There's no gas, no food. It is complete shit show and a big inconvenience. So lots of folks in our cities, when we see these storms come, we're like, we're just gonna ride out the storm, right? Now, Zach and Addie do not leave for Hurricane Katrina. Now, if you don't leave and you are staying here in the French Quarter where they are staying, it's really, really safe. We are 5 to 6 feet above sea level where we're standing right now. It's the only spot above sea level in New Orleans. Outside the French Quarter, Big Bowl, 10 feet below sea level. Now, right before this storm hit, that's when they moved in together and rented out a little apartment, and it would be on the corner of Governor Nichols and Rampart, so about 8 blocks away. Now, the folks that don't leave, right, they become the very first responders. They beat all the National Guard, all these other folks here, and Zach and I start doing a lot of good for the folks older folks that couldn't fend for themselves. They'll make little food, gumbo pots, they'll deliver all the food to their neighbors. They'll open up this little makeshift bar in the street, so really, really good what they're doing. So much so that when the newscasts finally start coming, Fox News, CNN, they interviewed this couple, right? They're in their 20s, they're good looking, they're happy, so they are in front of every single camera. Many rock stars. I remember seeing them all over the place. Zach and Addie taking care of the French Quarter, this and that. They thrived off of this crazy energy, right? They fell deeper in love. So much so that when things come halfway back to normal in 2006, that's when their relationship takes a turn for the worse, right? Lots of fighting, they're cheating on each other. Addie goes as far as accusing Zach of cheating on her with other dudes. So again, not a healthy relationship one bit, but they stay together. And they stay together, and they're like, you know what? Let's get a new apartment. Maybe that will change everything. So to September 2006, that's when they leave Governor Nichols and Rampart and they move to 826 Rampart. 826 Rampart, about 5 blocks away in this direction. And shortly after moving into this new apartment in October of 2006, that's when this couple goes missing. Nobody sees them for over a week. And I remember during this time, their friends here in New Orleans were like, if you see my friend Zach, if you see Addie, please call us. We're looking all over them. They weren't showing up for work, so nobody saw them. Well, on the 10th day, October 17th, 2006, that's when Zach is first spotted pacing back and forth on the corner of the Omni Royal Hotel. And he is pacing back and forth up there. Will he do it? Yes. He Peter Pans head first off the top of this hotel and kills himself right there in that pink parking garage. Now, the second the cops show up here, they're like, was this a murder? Was he pushed off? They're checking his body. Well, I'll find the suicide note in his t-shirt pocket. And in this suicide note, he'll blame everything on himself. The city, Hurricane Katrina, the wars in Iraq. But after he blames everything on himself, he says, whatever you do, please find my dear Addie. So the cops, after seeing this, they drop everything from this location and they jet over to Zach and Addie's apartment at 826 Rampart Street. They bust open the door and they start looking around in every single room. Now, the apartment is a complete pigsty. A lot of the boxes are still unpacked. Every single wall they see is cryptic messages, spray paint everywhere. It's crazy, just out of control. Then they make their way to the kitchen. And the kitchen is a bit eerie because it's very, very clean, right? So they start snooping around a little bit. And one of the cops, he notices a big arrow spray painted over the oven pointing down. So they look a little closer. And it's at this point, they see some pots in the stove. So they open up pot number one. And inside pot number one, there's Addie's head boiling in pot number one. They open up pot number two. Inside pot number two, there's Addie's hands and feet boiling. They open up the oven door. Inside the oven door, there's her arms and her legs. And the rest of her body is just chopped up into little pieces and thrown inside the refrigerator. What these cops didn't get to is in the same exact suicide note, Zach will go into specific detail the night that Addie accused him of cheating on her. She was taking a bath that night. Zach will sneak up behind her. He'll strangle her to death with his bare hands. After killing Addie, this sick son of a bitch will go to work, do cocaine. After day 3 of her body just sitting in the tub, he's like, oh, fuck, I gotta get rid of it. He'll stroll down to the hardware store. He'll buy a handsaw. He'll come back. He'll saw off Addie's head. He'll then put her head on the counter and start giving her a haircut. Then this sick son of a bitch again goes back to work, more drugs. This goes on for over 3 days. But then he writes in this suicide note, in this fit of rage, I had to take my life for the life that it took. And on that same day, October 27th, 2006, he'll stroll down from his apartment. He'll go to the top of the Omni Royal Hotel. He'll hang out on the pool bar for about 6 hours. He'll make friends. He'll unload all his credit cards, high five, good times. He'll then sneak away around 8 p.m., come to this ledge, burn himself 28 times, one for every meager year of his existence. He'll then jump up on that ledge and then take his own life. Now, this is our most recent tale of the evening, but it comes with one of our most recent ghosts. Any folks that are into the paranormal or the ghost in this group, people always report seeing the ghost of Zach pacing till this very day back and forth on top of that building. He's our most recent ghost here in this city, and this is where people see him all the time. What questions do you have for me?
Does the ghost ever come into the rooms?
I've not seen him. People just say they see the apparition of him on top of the roof.
Right, so never in the rooms.
Yes. Why, are you staying at the Omni Royal Hotel? No. It's a gorgeous hotel.
No, I'm a fan.
Yeah, it's a beautiful.
It's the hotel name?
It's the Omni Royal. It's a
We
freaking.
stay at a lot of haunted hotels.
Okay.
For my work,
Yes.
So that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, so it haunts the top. So, pretty jacked up story. Hoping to bring any out. That's what y'all freaks signed up for. Hopefully, it's just gonna keep on getting worse as we go. Okay. But yeah. So this was a big national news story, and a big common question I always get at this point. Since he was like cooking her, he was using crawfish seasoning. And the smell of crawfish crab boil. Well, they believe they ask me all the time, did he eat her? Was he cannibalizing it? And he was using the seasoning to disguise the smell of her body. And through the autopsy, they did not find anything. They believe he was just cooking her to freaking out, getting rid of the body. He didn't know what to do. Again, this was national news. The Gumbo murder. I remembered I was in college in this time, but a wild story. Lots of books. Since it's such a recent story, people are like, hey, should you tell it? There's so many books, documentaries, movies, and so forth out about this subject matter to where I always feel very comfortable sharing it, specifically across from where it ended.
Do you know, were they both from New Orleans?
No, they weren't. They were not. I don't know specifically where they were from, but like many people, they come here and visit. They fall in love with the place, and they never leave. Yep.
Was he actually cheating?
Okay, so it was a very, very unhealthy. When you read the books in regards to this subject matter, probably he was always seen hanging out in gay bars. That's why, again, it was. You can dive deep into this. She was still a stripper during all of this time. So again, not a healthy situation. Not saying all strippers. God, I sound so bad. Don't ask me any more questions about that. I'm sounding so bad. I'm like, yeah, she's into that stuff. I mean, but yeah, it's probably not a good situation. But yeah, very, very volatile. As the coming months leading up to this, all of our friends were like, what are y'all doing to stay? Lots of drugs involved into this as well. So, everybody good?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so we're gonna. Yes.
You said that he kept going to work. What did he do for his job?
So he worked at he bartending. And he also worked for a grocery store.
But okay.
Yeah, he was just going to work like nothing ever happened.
Working,
yep.
Like at night shifts.
Yep.
But,
yeah, just doing his thing. Yep. Everybody good?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. Yeah, so it's a big old. You can see the lights on the right side. That's where the bar. It's a beautiful view because it's one of our tallest buildings in the French Quarter. So
But no one was up there when he did that.
yes, it was packed.
Oh, shit.
It was packed. They had a band playing.
Put it on this pink though?
He just snuck away without anybody seeing him. The place was packed. He was making friends. Band was playing. Everything. Hold on. Yep.
So, okay, so you landed on this pink building, not the sidewalk?
Correct. He landed on top of where this green door is. Yep.
Wow.
Sweet. All right. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go this way. We're gonna do a quick little fun ghost story. Then we'll break down the mafia, and then we'll do a crazy fire story. Okay? Let's do it. I'm gonna keep my backpack on for this one, but walking by this place, I always like to point out just a few things, kind of pulling in from the side. So, Pierre Maspero's, very, very famous building because this is the location of our first slave exchange. Okay, so all the slaves would be sold on that top floor. Guys would go in, would check in here, and that's where it all went down on that second floor. So pretty wild area right here. Now, this is called the Napoleon House, right? Really fascinating, fun little ghost story. So the reason it's called the Napoleon House, all right, so our first mayor after we become a state in 1812 was a guy named Nicholas Girard. Nicholas Girard, he didn't speak a lick of English. This dude was French through and through, and he had the biggest man crush on Napoleon. He loved him some Napoleon. Lots of folks here in our city did. Vive la France. We had so many French people here during this time. And Nicholas Girard hears that Napoleon is now captured by the British and taken to an island called St. Helena. So he's like, you know what? F that shit. I'm going to break my boy out. Loved him. So he'd come over here. This was a bar during this time in the early 1800s, and he'd meet up with some pirate friends. One of Nick Girard's good friends was a guy named Dominic Yu. And during the course leading up to the 1820s, Nicholas Girard, our mayor, after not mayor, he's still a very wealthy dude. So he lived in this house. He owned this house. He started retrofitting the second and third floor to be fit for a king. And he was making friends with Dominic Yu. He hired these pirates to go to St. Helena, break Napoleon out, and then bring him back here to New Orleans. That way he can run the city here and live like a king. And this guy was super wealthy, this Nicholas Girard guy. So he did a great job at retrofitting this whole place, fit for a king. A week before Dominic Yu and his crew is about to leave, word gets back, 1821, that Napoleon Bonaparte passed away. Now, this breaks Nick Girard's heart. He invested all his money into this house. He just kept it for himself. But Napoleon's ghost still haunts the second and third floor of this place till this day. And everybody's like, what the shit? Dude never came here. How could you say he haunts this place? Well, it's really interesting. It's fun. I like to mention this to my guests. But his death mass is 2 blocks away, right? So we got one of 3 death masks from the French. It was a gift, and it's right in our state museum. And people here in the city, they believed his ghost came with that death mask and then strolled right down to where he was supposed to live. If you ever came down here. So anyway, I always like to point this out. It's a super famous bar, like top 10 famous bars in our city. They're famous for their Pim cups, and this is just like a nice little location after the tour if you want to walk here. Good? All right, let's go this block. On our way to our next longer story, the upstairs lounge story, I'm gonna stop and kind of just introduce everybody to a little bit of the mafia, how we came here, and that'll be a nice little intro to one of our last stories of the evening. Let's do it. So this is the Supreme Court building. We're gonna finish our tour on the other side on the steps of the Supreme Court building. But as we walk, it's pretty fun to look at. So they wanted to build the whole thing out of marble and they ran out of money halfway through. So the 3rd and 4th floors are built out of granite. It just goes, it's just bad. It's just really bad budgeting by our government, you know? It happens, I guess, in every single city, but yeah.
They spent the money on LaToya Canyon.
Yeah, no doubt, I know, huh? Yeah.
That Alva Camara contract somehow.
Dude, what a shit show she is. Unbelievable. Fortune and tying up her slaves. Other than that, people tell stories about her doing experiments, and I'm like, oh man.
Just
anyway,
like Ball.
yes, absolutely. But she was a socialite. She was a bad woman. People did hate her. So that kind of part is really good. Thank you so much. We're gonna walk straight this way.
Yeah, so apparently
Introduce everybody to the mafia. Now, full disclosure, I'm Sicilian. Anytime I do a tour experience, I love talking mafia. It's my way of saying, fuck yeah, mafia is awesome. Even though they're bad dudes, not good. But what people don't know is, New York, even Chicago, a lot of these places, they get, all the talks when it comes to the mafia, but the mafia started here in the United States of America. It comes off the lemon boats in the late 1860s. It will then fester up to the bigger cities like y'all's, New York, New Jersey, in the late 1880s and early 1890s. So the way it worked is for 2,000 years, Sicily was the redheaded stepchild of Europe, right? So the Holy Roman Empire, the Roman Empire, France, Spain, the Ottoman Empire, everybody owned and ran this little island right there in the Mediterranean at one time or another. So over the times, these oppressive governments, lots of Sicilian families, they'd put together these little gangs to kind of protect them from these soldiers or from anything that would happen in the city. They had a better return rate than these other oppressive governments. They didn't give two shits if a Sicilian family had their cattle stolen or so forth. So these folks in these little towns would go to the mafia gangs and they would take care of things with them. And this kind of grew and grew and grew. So much so that in 1860, when they finally start putting together these Italian-speaking provinces, they become a country, Italy, 1860. That's when Sicily's like, you know what, we're not part of this shit. Eat it, we're out. And that's when the Sicilians come here to the United States for a better life. A lot of Italians from southern Italy, even northern Italy, will take that same kind of jump. They're like, you know what, we're not digging this whole country thing, and that's when they come over to our place. Now, Sicilians chose New Orleans because of the Gulf of Mexico. It reminded them of the Mediterranean, melting pot, lots of folks, so it kind of really made sense, and they will come over here. These Sicilians will bring awesome restaurants, cool grocery stores, fun accents, and they will bring the mafia with them. Now, the mafia that comes here to New Orleans was kind of the wannabes. These were the folks in Sicily that knew how the mobs worked. I'm gonna let this pass. Oh my God. This is awesome.
This guy's from the mob. That guy was from Sicily.
Yeah. Yeah, not from Sicily, right? Yeah, so, but they will bring over all of these amazing things and the mafia will come with them. Like I was saying, the mafia gangs that start sprouting up over here, they're younger people that understood the inner workings of the mafia there. The mafia in Sicily, they didn't leave, they had their gangs, they were rocking out. So the folks here in New Orleans will put together these little gangs to protect themselves from the Irish that were already here, or the French, Spanish, and so forth, and they'd stick together. Now, it was very regional. The way the mafia worked here was regional, okay? So, quick example to drive this home. Us three, we're from the east coast of Sicily. We'd start our gang and stay together. Palermo, y'all four, y'all stay together. West Coast, y'all stay together. We say Biggie, Tupac, East Coast, West Coast. Y'all did not hang out with our gang and vice versa. It was very, very regional. Those were some of the kind of big aspects, and we will stick that way, right? Our city always had this kind of regional kind of take on it. It was not like up north when they have a lot of commissions or rival gangs. There was never a rival gang here. It was kind of just one powerful gang, and that's the one that ran the show. Now, we're going to end our tour tonight driving into some more mafia. I'm going to talk about our famous mob boss that ran the city with an iron fist for 4 decades, but now you have a little background. Now, before we go to our next long true crime story, I like to mention the word mafia. People ask me about this, and there's 2 versions that I wanted to share with my guests in this little stop talking about the mafia. Now, the first is a lot of people believe it was just Arabic and Sicilian slang for a gang that protect against oppressive government. That's it. Very, very simple definition. I favor the more romantic one. And there's another belief that the word mafia came from an acronymic slogan that sprouted out Sicily in the 1200s. Now, in the 1200s, the French were running Sicily. And there's a story of this French soldier that tried to rape the Sicilian woman, and she fought him. And out of this defiance, this French soldier killed her. Now, her boyfriend avenged her death by killing this soldier with his bare fist in front of all kinds of people. And after this happens, more rebellious acts start happening from the Sicilians against these French soldiers, and an acronymic slogan will pop up. And this acronymic slogan is Morte alla Francia, Italia all'ana. Try to say that right. But if you take the first letter of Death to France is Italy's cry, it spells out the word mafia. And that's a lot of the belief too. I like that version a little better. It's more badass. But anyway, we don't know to this day. And like a lot of mafia tales, there's always a lot of mystery. A lot of secretism. And it happens so much here. We're the only city in the United States of America that till this day doesn't have a rat or some kind of FBI informant. We don't know the inner workings of our mafia. It is very, very secretive. The one guy that came out and wrote a book about the mafia in 2012, his name was Frenchy Belay. He was a 70-year-old gentleman that worked for our mob buster in the 1950s and 1960s, stabbed to death 2 months after his book comes out. So till this day, we don't know a lot in regards to specific breakdowns of the underbosses and the soldiers, which is pretty wild. Everybody good? All right, let's go right around the corner. This next story is a bit heavy, but it's a true crime story. It's unsolved to this very day, and it's about a bad fire. Let's go do it. We're going to focus all our energy of this next tale right across the street. We're on the corner of Charters and Iberville, and our next story is going to take place on the second floor. And this is going to be the door of the staircase that leads to this area. So I'm going to talk about this building specifically. And it begins in 1970 when a guy named Phil Estes, he buys this second floor structure on this corner. And Phil Estes, he wants to turn this place into a gay bar for guys. And the second he buys this spot, he turns it over to his good friend, Buddy Rasmussen. And when you study Buddy Rasmussen during the story, he's the one dude I wanted to meet and become friends with so much. He seemed like the best, nicest guy in the world. And Buddy starts renovating this place, right? And before we go any further with this story, let's talk about what he did to this place before it launches Halloween night in 1970. And the place is just red as shit, all right? So all the descriptions are red. So there are 13 wooden steps from that black door that lead up to the second floor, right? The wooden steps, there's red carpet on both sides. The second you get up to the last step, there's a framed picture of Queen Victoria doing that little clap, and it says, "Even the Queen gets the clap." Now, the second you open up the door to go to the upstairs lounge, this is the main room, right? So the bar ran parallel with where we are standing, and everything's red. There's red carpet, there's red drapes, all the bar stools are red, pink and red laminate on the bar. Behind the bar, there's a fountain with mirrors, and at the edge of the bar in this direction, in this little corner, there would be a white baby grand piano and then a little jukebox. There are 2 framed pictures in the upstairs lounge during this time. There is one framed picture of Burt Reynolds from his 1972 photo shoot. He's a naked, you know, cosmopolitan, okay, famous picture. And then there's a picture of Mark Spitz framed in his Speedo wearing his gold medals. So that's a little bit of the breakdown. Then there's 2 large rooms, I say large rooms, smaller rooms right behind the main large room. There's a little dance area and then a little theater room. So it's big room and then 2 small rooms behind it. Everybody with me so far? Cool. So the second Buddy launches this place, Upstairs Lounge 1970, he made it a very safe location, right? So we were considered the queer capital of the South during this time, but other than New York or San Francisco, there was no employment protection for gay men or lesbians during this time. So a lot of CD bars is my point. And Buddy was trying to kind of change this in the sense to where the bars here in the French Quarter, when it came to a gay bar or a place where lesbians hung out, it was just like a hookup place, right? It was not a fun, awesome place. And Buddy was kind of changing that in the sense that Buddy was the first person to get a dance permit for gay guys, right? And so till that time, if you were at a drinking establishment or a bar and 2 dudes were standing too close or high-fiving, dancing, you can get thrown in jail or fined. So again, he's changing it. And Buddy made friends with a lot of the police officers and local officials, and they're like, you know what? Like this guy so much, have whatever you want. So again, he's changing the vibe of this place. Now every Sunday what Buddy did, he did a bottomless beer special. And this bottomless beer special, shit, it would be happening right around this time. It went from 5 to 7. And it cost $1 to go into the upstairs lounge. And the second you got in, he'd give you a mug. And for those 2 hours, you can drink as much beer as you want. The second 7 o'clock was over. If you gave back the mug, you get 50 cents, or you can keep it as a little souvenir. It had the name of Upstairs Lounge on it. So Sundays are always packed. June 24th, 1973, it's a Sunday, and the bottomless beer special is coming to a close. The time is now 7 p.m. Now, the place is packed, and it's at this time, Buddy Rasmussen, he's changing the cashier to his friend Hugh Crowley, who is like his little manager. I'm gonna let this gentleman pass. Lots of folks. He's having a good time. Okay, awesome. So he's looking for his friend with the car, right? His friend was dropped him off. I'm just joking. That's not. I have no idea. All right. So, but the time is now 7 p.m. and they're changing over, but it's packed that night. Now, it's around the same time a guy walks into the bar, and his name is Roger Dale Nunez. Now, Roger Dale is the kind of dude that the second he walked in the bar, everybody's like, oh, fuck, this guy's here. Bad energy. He always started shit. He hung out at other seedy bars. He was just known in the community for being just a terrible person. And the second he comes in, everybody's like, oh, fuck, Roger's here. So he gets a drink. The time is now 7:15 p.m. when Roger Dale makes his way to the bathroom. Now, inside the bathroom of the upstairs lounge at this time, there are three other gentlemen, a guy named Dubois, Michael, and Steven. And it's at this time Roger Dale tries to hook up and pick up on Steven. And this was a big no-no in the upstairs lounge. Buddy didn't like the bathrooms to be used as a place to kind of hook up on guys. He wanted people just to come here having a good time. So Steven's like, you know what, F this. He goes and tells Buddy. Buddy and you go into the bathroom like, what the hell are you doing in here, Roger Dale? And Roger Dale loses it. He tries to attack Steven and Michael for being snitches. So there's a big old commotion, and they drag Roger Dale and they throw him down out here in the streets and like, you can't come back. The time is now 7:25 p.m. Buddy and you, everybody goes back into the bar. At this time, Piano Dave is playing some songs. Everybody's having a good time. The time is now 7:45 p.m. when a man enters Walgreens. Now, the Walgreens is still there to this day. It's on the corner. And at this time, this man, dark complexion, late 20s, dark hair, dark eyes, fits the description of Roger Dale. We don't know to this day if it is him, but he will buy a 7-ounce can of lighter fluid and a book of matches. The time is now 7:53 p.m. when somebody, till this day we don't have any witnesses of it, but the same person is going to unload 7 ounces of lighter fluid on the second step of the upstairs lounge, roll up 2 $10 bills, take matches, light it on fire. Now the staircase will go up in flames. And for minutes, all this energy, all these chemicals, all these flames are going to catch fire of the wood. It's going to soak in all of this lighter fluid. The carpet on the walls, it's all going to go up in flames. Now, nobody opens up the door. So for many minutes, this fire is just building and building in this upstairs lounge. The time is now 7:56 p.m. when somebody spots smoke coming from this little doorway. That is when the fire department is called. Again, nobody's opened up the door. So all of this energy is building and building and building. The time is now 7:57 p.m. when a man named Luther, he hears commotion going on in the streets, and that's when he opens up this door. This will basically be a detonation of a bomb that will go off. Fire will flood the second floor and burn everything in its wake. Now, it's at this time, every person on the second floor is screaming for their lives. They're trying to come to the windows. They're trying to run out the staircase. People are being burned to death from their head up to their feet. I'm gonna let this pass real quick. Can everybody hear me good? Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
So the air basically made that fire.
All of it. This was like ticking time bomb for about 3 minutes. So the second they open up this is when the fire takes over every single inch of the second floor. Now, Buddy immediately springs into action, and if you hear Buddy Rasmussen at this point, it was really, really bad for you. He is yelling for people to follow him through the dance floor, out through the theater. He is the only man that knows about the secret exit on the second floor in the back of this establishment. Now, the other men that didn't hear this, they're gathering by the windows. They're trying to jump out, but at this time in the 1970s, every single window of this building is shut by big bars. So there are bars in every single window, these big steel bars, so nobody can make their way out. Bodies are being piled up, burning by every single window. Many of the men hunker down behind the bar, and everything is burning. People can hear the screams on the street at this time. The time is now 7:58 p.m. when all the screams turn to silence. And that's when the fire is just rolling out of all of these windows. The time is now 7:59 p.m. and that's when the firefighters first make their way and enter this place. Now, it is said when reading the police reports and the books in regards to the subject matter, many firefighters will have to take turns going up and down. They couldn't handle seeing the way the bodies were burned, all of the madness on the second floor. They were related to as something out of World War II, concentration center or something like that. It was that bad. Now, Buddy makes all of his friends, the people that did survive, they're going to the second floor and they're making their way out to the street. The time is now 8:12 p.m. when the fire is completely put out. The fire here at the upstairs, at the upstairs lounge raged out of control for 19 minutes. These same walls that protected these folks here were the same walls that killed all of them that were trapped up there. The time is now 8:30 p.m., and that's when it is said Buddy Rasmussen is pacing back and forth on the street. Now, it's at this time the police, reporters, all the folks from the surrounding areas are coming here to see the commotion. And Buddy Rasmussen is looking for a man named Roger Dale Nunez. He is nowhere to be seen. Now, people say that he was walking towards Wanda's, which was 2 blocks in the way. We don't have any witnesses of that. They say this man, Roger Dale, was out of breath. Again, no witnesses that this ever took place. The time is now 9 p.m. when many of the victims and the bodies start making their way to Charity Hospital. Now, many of these bodies, they can't be identified. They're that badly burned. Now, in the aftermath of this fire, as the weeks go on, 32 men will be burnt to death from this upstairs lounge. Until this very day, there are 3 unidentified bodies. So, lots of gay folks during this time, men, women, they left their families from other cities where, maybe they didn't know. And they would come to the city, maybe not tell people. So these 3 individuals, their families maybe believe they're missing to this very day. They kind of picked up and said, hey, they didn't know where they were, and they were that badly burned. Now, Roger Dale, 1974, he'll tell friends that he had nothing to do with this fire. Other friends will tell him that, hey, Roger Dale would always brag about burning this place down, but again, till this day, we do not know. New Orleans Police Department has never named the culprit. They just said, hey, you know what? It's an arson. That's it. They never questioned anybody in regards to this subject matter that we're discussing. Now, Roger Dale, wacko. In 1974, September of that year, he will get married. The night of his wedding, he tells his new wife, I'm gay, I'm impotent, we can't have sex. She kicks him out. He lives in the trailer. He commits suicide 2 months later. Now, there's a bit of a liberation after here, okay? So again, I mentioned how the main cities in regards to the gay community was that of San Francisco and New York, but it will kind of spark a little bit of a movement. In the sense that in the late 70s, there were memorials about the upstairs lounge. It was kind of hush-hush. Our local paper was very, very conservative at this time, so it was never brought up. And again, if they brought up any of the names of people that were here, you ousted yourself. You could be kicked out the military or lose your job. So even the guys that survived, they rarely said anything about ever being here because they were scared about their families or losing their job. Now, this story, it goes untold. No groups ever come over here. It's something I always kind of read about. And in 2003, our city put together a nice memorial. And what I'm going to do is we're going to jump across the street. I'm going to talk a little bit about the memorial, and then we'll do our halftime break. Till this day, we don't know. Maybe what I told you, maybe believes that Roger Dale did this. But again, is it the culprit? Is it conclusive? We'll never know. It's a very, very famous true crime story here.
Quick question.
What question do you have for me?
Was there anything underneath it?
Yeah, so
you said it was a second story.
the same bar.
Is this a bar?
Yeah, so the same bar, Giamani's, it's still there to this day. It was operating during this time. Yep, it was untouched from the fire. Very good question. Yes, this was the upstairs lounge, and there was a little canopy, and that door is the door for the staircase. Very good question. Yes, it's just storage. It just looks like storage for another business or something like that. But Giamani's is still operating.
What was the point of the bars on the window?
So a lot of them, I mean, when you walk around the French Quarter, there's still a lot of windows that are barred shut. Yep.
Like, that makes sense
Yep.
right there, because you're on the first floor.
And there's a super famous picture of a guy named Billy Larson. Billy Larson, he almost looks like something out of a horror movie in the sense where he was stuck trying to get out, and he looked like this burnt mannequin. It was one of the most famous pictures that made its way in the international papers. Again, in the papers, it was never mentioned because they didn't know how to say what kind of bar it was. Yep. Everybody good?
Yeah.
Again, didn't mean to, it's a crime story. Hopefully, again, a little rough. What we're going to do is we're going to go across the street. I'm going to point out the little memorial. In 2003, the city put this bronze plaque. It cost $4,000. People walk by it, not even know what they're walking by. And then we'll go to Colegiaros, do a little break. Is that cool? Let's do it. This, but again, what always kind of jumps out to me is, the 3 unidentified white males. Till this day, we don't know. Just recently, this Ferris LeBlanc, people knew his name, so he was identified here in New Orleans. But in 2017, we had a congressman. He was a war veteran. He was for the Army, and he found out Ferris LeBlanc was also in the military. So this congressman here in our state, he hunted down Ferris LeBlanc's family in California. His family, again, they always thought he was a missing person. They never gave him a proper burial. So just recently, 2018, they gave Ferris LeBlanc a proper burial, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's do a halftime break. Let's go to Caballeros. A little water, beer, whatever you want, and then after that, we'll do our last 2 stories. You good?
So I'm sitting here with Danny from, where are you from, brother?
Chicago.
He's from Chicago. We're taking a little break here at the bar. And so how you enjoying the tour so far, Streets of Sin?
So far, the tour is great. Our tour guide's amazing. He's telling us all the facts that you probably wouldn't get with a regular tour guide. He's very animated, which I really appreciate, and he's very well spoken. So very loud, giving us good details, taking us to spots that are probably well off the beaten path, which are better in my opinion because we're getting a lot of the highlights of places that you normally wouldn't get on a regular commercial tour. So everything's been great so far. We really like it, and we're hoping for a banger at the end here. So
Hell yeah, man. Thank you.
sure.
I mean, this is like nice cocktail area, you know, really, really nice. How you doing?
Yes, sir.
How much it costs to stay?
It's not as much as like a Ritz, but we're hanging out at a really cool spot. It's like it's a spot not many people even know exists when they're walking around the French Quarter. It's called the Exchange Alley. And during the late 1700s, early 1800s, there was markets. People would come down here to buy little foods and goods. It was very famous because during the 1800s, it had a little fencing academy, and you'd always see the clanks of these swords and people fencing out here in the alley. But just a really cool spot. You walk right past here, you never know. And it's a really good location for this next story because this is one of the alleys where the person we're about to talk about was last seen alive. Now, on the morning of July 20th, 2003, a man staying in a hotel not too far away from where we are on Bourbon Street, he will call the downstairs lobby and he'll tell the lobby, look, I'm hearing screams coming from the room next to me. I'm like, what are you hearing? He hears over and over being repeated loud and clear, I'm the Lord, you are my servant, I'm the Lord, you are my servant. Now, they send somebody from the hotel to check this thing out, but nothing ever comes of it. 6 hours later, on the same floor in this hotel, the maids start cleaning the rooms, and one of the maids opens up the room right next to where this call came from, and that's when she discovers one of the wildest, craziest murder scenes ever. This, my friends, is the Bourbon Street bloodbath story. So, moments after she discovers this crazy murder scene, there are about 20 cops there, and the scene of the crime is wild. So what the cops walk into is glass everywhere. So there are champagne bottles and glass all over the floors wherever they walk, all right? They're just tiptoeing around glass. On top of the bed are 3 voodoo dolls. And they're like, what the fuck is going on here? They're voodoo dolls? It gets really bizarre when they walk into the bathroom. And when they open up the bathroom door, that's when they find Bible pages torn off and stuck to every inch of the bathroom, on the ceiling, on the walls, on the floor. In the big tub is a body floating face down in a pool of blood. So the second they see all this, okay, so let's replay this, okay? So champagne bottles, voodoo dolls, Bible pages all over, and a body floating in a pool of blood. So nuts. The cops have never seen anything like this, but immediately they need to start breaking down who is this and who done this, right? So immediately they find out the guy that is floating dead in the pool of blood is a 34-year-old man named Sean Johnson. Now, Sean Johnson is in town, okay? So during this time, he is from Atlanta, and he works for Microsoft, he does sound, and they're doing this big convention here in our city. So he was here July 17th. So he was here about 3 nights before all of this went down. And they start talking to his friends, his family that everybody knows. And this is one of the nicest guys, right? He was a super friendly dude. And immediately, all the guys he was here with, they're like freaking out. They're like, holy shit, I was just with this guy. And it was kind of like one of those things, like we've all done this on vacation, right? The last night that you're in town, you want to stay out a little later, do some craziest stuff. So Sean Johnson and all his friends, they were about to leave that next morning, July 20th, and they start rocking out in the French Quarter. They partying. Come 2 o'clock, that's when they make their way to the bar called the Dungeon. Now, it's one of my favorite bars to this very day. It's really close to where we are. It's on the corner of Toulouse and Bourbon Street. If anybody's in the rock and roll, that's what you find there. They play all kinds of Nine Inch Nails, Marilyn Manson, crazy songs you wouldn't hear in most bars. You can't take pictures in the place. So a pretty cool bar. And him and his friends are hanging out there. Around 2:30 a.m., his friend's like, bro, we gotta leave. And he's like, no, I'm sticking it out. I'm gonna stay out all night long. They leave, and that's the last time his friends ever see Sean Johnson ever again. It's at this point he meets up with some other friends. 4 goths is what they call them, right? We all went to high school. I think I played in a rock and roll band, the emo look, all black, the makeup, that kind of stuff. That's who his friend last sees him with as he's leaving. So that's a little bit about this guy, okay? So super friendly. He's making friends with everybody his last night in town. Now, at the murder scene, back to the murder scene, the cops, they immediately go downstairs and they want the hotel footage of the lobby, seeing who's coming in and who's coming out. And around 5 a.m. in the morning, that's when they see Sean Johnson going into the hotel with 4 people, right? So they put this information all over the news. And I remember it too. I was in college during the time of this, and they put this video footage and like, if you see any of these people, contact us. Well, one of the girls, so there's 2 girls and 2 dudes in the video footage, and one of the girls is a girl named Deidre. And she kind of turns herself in. She's like, look, I was there, I met the guy, my other friend's there, but the second I went in there, I had bad vibes, so I left immediately. And it kind of tied up with a story. They don't see her long at all. They see her going in, and like 5 minutes later, she's leaving by herself, right? So it kind of ties in. But it's her that gives the cops these other 3 folks' names. The cops did not have them at this point. And the other 3 folks' name is a guy named Ben, a guy named Worry, it gets weird, and then a girl named Never, all right? So you got Ben, Worry, and Never. So to this point, the cops, they spring into action, and they can't find any of these 3 anywhere. So what the cops start doing is they start jumping from different establishments here in the French Quarter. It was said that all of these 4 folks, they always hung out around Jackson Square. They would always hang out in these little alleys late at night, walking around, just having a good time in all hours of the night. And eventually they questioned this guy at Reverend Zombie's voodoo shop. And it's this girl, and it said that she used to hook up with this guy named Worry, right? She's like, I don't know anything about him. I know that guy, Ben. I know he works at Arnaud's. So Arnaud's is a famous restaurant. It's around the corner from where we are. Now, the second the cops, get this guy, Ben, they get him to the police station, he starts freaking out, and he spills all the beans about what the hell happened that night. He's freaking out. He's like, I don't want to spend any time in jail. I'll tell you whatever I want, whatever you want, I'll give it to you. And that's when he breaks down, and he tells the cops that around 2:30 a.m., they meet this guy, Sean Johnson, him, Deidre, Never, and Worry. And around 3:30 a.m., that's when they leave the dungeon, and they start walking around. They start hanging out in Jackson Square. They're walking around these very areas that we're standing right in. And around 5 a.m., that's when Sean Johnson's like, look, I have this big, awesome tub, this awesome room. Let's pick up some champagne bottles and throw a little party in my hotel room. And they're like, awesome, let's do this. Now, Ben tells the cops that at this time, he sees Worry and Never kind of whispering to each other. He doesn't think anything of it, but he's like, you know what? Let's go back and party. So they pick up 12 bottles of champagne. They enter the hotel room around 5:30 a.m. and immediately Ben tells the cops, they all start taking off their clothes. They start pouring the champagne bottles in the tub. And at this time, Never, the girl, and Sean start making out, right? They're hooking up. Everybody's having a big freak show. Worry, at this time, starts ripping pages out and starts putting them all over. And they're like, whatever, you fucking weirdo. He starts putting the voodoo dolls. It's almost as if he's setting something up. He's preparing for some kind of ritual. We have no idea. Ben then tells him, after he completely destroys the Bible and puts all of these pages up, that's when he leaves the bathroom, comes back moments later with a champagne bottle and starts beating Sean Johnson over the head with a champagne bottle. Now, Ben, at this point, he tells the cops, oh shit, I'm freaking out. He starts putting on his pants and tries to leave. But he says it's this point, that's when Never and Worry start smiling as Worry strangles him to death under the tub, screaming, I'm the Lord, you are my servant. I'm the Lord, you are my servant. So the cops, after hearing this story, they charge Ben with first-degree murder. He is an accomplice into this murder, and they're trying to find these other 2, Worry and Never. And they're missing from the city for many, many months. They don't hear anything. Well, an anonymous tip in South Florida turns up, and this guy randomly hanging out at the bar with his friends one night calls the Florida cops, and he's like, look, I just overheard a dude bragging that he killed somebody in New Orleans a few months ago. Don't know anything about it, but here's his description, and I think this is his name. And it was him. It was Christopher Lane. That was this guy named Worry's name. And they leave New Orleans. They go there. They arrest him, and Worry turns out to be Christopher Lane, never is this girl named Carla Fry. And they were kind of both hightailing. They tell the cops this story of how some Italian mob made them kill this guy, Sean Johnson, that night. It's all a bunch of bullshit. They have a big trial. It's the first trial after Hurricane Katrina, and Christopher Lane is now serving life sentence in prison. Carla Fry is now out of jail. She was given 5 years, and Ben also received a reduced sentence. This is known as the Bourbon Street Bloodbath, one of the wildest murder scenes to ever exist in our city. Now, it's a bit of a cautionary tale, and as I've been studying this story and sharing it with previous guests, the French Quarter, it brings so much light. It's such an awesome place to hang out, like many of our cities, Chicago, all over the country, right? But around every corner of light, there's always darkness, and this is one of those tales that exists here in this city of this awesome dude making friends, and then the next minute, dying in a pool of his own blood. What questions do you have for me?
I may have missed it, but where?
So again, some of the other friends. So after they left the dungeon, it's not in here. It's a hotel really close to where we are. Till this day, the police reports don't say specifically one, but there's only 2 large hotels that it could have been: Royal Sonesta or the Four Seasons, like one of those right there in Bourbon. That's why it's referred to as the Bourbon Street Bloodbath. But I couldn't find till this day the specific like room or floor. So as they kind of do the interviewing of a lot of the folks from the voodoo stores, they walked around. They hung out at Jackson Square for a bit. This kind of like group of goss with the 4 folks. They kind of talked there for an hour. Then they kind of walked. This alley shows up as a place where they kind of walked, hung out. And it was around this very area where Sean's like, you know what, let's go to my room and party. So this shows up in a lot of the books that I studied in regards to this story, this little alley. Everybody good?
Yeah.
Awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish strong. We're going to go sit on the Supreme Court. We're going to talk about one of the world's most famous murders. It's a bit of a conspiracy, but hopefully after hearing this next story, it'll leave everybody thinking a little bit about what you've heard tonight, and then we'll part ways and have a good evening. Let's do it.
Thank you.
We got gifts tonight, too. It's like Christmas. Yeah. You can thank my friend David and Butch. You know, it's a special night. Dude, all of this is so cool. So a lot of these are super, super nice. Here, we're going to go right up here. And right here, you can sit, you can stand. This is where I've been finishing. It's been a great little spot to finish the tour tonight. Awesome. Cool. Good spot. They always keep these steps clean. That's why I like this little area, right? Sweet. Like I said, I'm going to go over some housekeeping. I got some gifts to hand out to everybody tonight. So before everybody goes, don't leave too fast. Now, a little different. Like I mentioned, that's going to involve some conspiracy, but I'm going to talk about one of the world's most famous murders, and I'm going to tie it into why we are sitting by the Supreme Court building. Kind of really tie all this information together. It'll make sense at the very end. Now, I'm going to bring up a guy's name. Maybe some of y'all have heard of him, maybe y'all haven't. A guy named Gabriel Princip, all right? So if you haven't heard of Gabriel Princip throughout history, in 1914, in June, he will shoot the Archduke Ferdinand in the head. Bang! Kill him and his wife, right? And this takes place in Bosnia, right? So Princip was a Serbian student, and he whacks Archduke Ferdinand, which basically this murder will spring in forward World War I. It will set a whole world on fire. Now, it's one of these kind of big murders, assassinations, like, what if it didn't take place? How would this world look? All right? It really, really does set into motion. Now, what's interesting about this assassination is months before this guy came here, this Archduke Ferdinand, so the way it worked, Ottoman Empire, it was running all of these other countries, and Serbia, Bosnia was one of them. And these young students were like, we don't like the fact that we're being run by the Ottoman. I'm going to show that son of a bitch. Bang! Shoots him. Kills him. I'm going to let this pass. He's kind of far away. I can kind of talk. All right. I think it's coming this way. I was kind of just preparing myself.
Little golf carts, man. They got better speakers.
Dude, I know, huh? Oh, this guy's been driving me nuts for about 6 years. I think he like charges people that like drive him, you know? It's like his little side business, but that shit is loud. That's him. That's him. Omar. All right. So Gabriel Princip, and what's interesting about this assassination? Shit. So what's interesting about this assassination is 2 months before Archduke Ferdinand came here, Serbia, they put in the newspapers his parade route, what time it was going to be, where it was going to be, and kind of laid out the whole groundwork. Kind of really helped all of these little rebels prepare their assassination. It's very, very interesting because you spring forward a few decades, something very similar will happen in our country, right? Our 35th president, John F. Kennedy, he lands in Dallas, 9 o'clock. He's getting out. There's a big motorcade, there's a parade, and around 12:30 p.m., a guy named Lee Harvey Oswald will set shop 6th floor of the Texas School Depository Building and fire 3 shots. Now, the first shot, it lands in our president's neck and out through his lung. The second shot will hit the governor who was sitting in front of him, and the third shot is said to blow his skull completely off. And there's that video footage till this day of, Jackie hanging out the convertible, grabbing, and it was said that she didn't want any of her husband's skull to ever hit the ground, so she was just trying to connect it. So wild, wild shit. But before that motorcade and visit happened, 2 months before, they gave him the whole parade route and all of these things to help Lee Harvey set up shop and make it super, super simple. So again, why am I sharing these stories? Well, it's another little story that is very, very much connected with the city of New Orleans. When you bring up John F. Kennedy and this assassination, it always shows up here. And this is where the only court case involved in the Kennedy assassination took place. And now we're going to tie it together why they would pick this court building to throw it. So the Kennedy bros, they had 3 big enemies during the time of the 50s leading up into the presidents in the early 60s. And they are the Union, the CIA, and the Mafia, right? So the CIA, think military-industrial complex, right? The Kennedys were big, big anti-Cold War advocates. They wanted to shut that shit down, and the CIA was like, we're making so much money, we gotta have this war. So it was one of those things always butting heads with the CIA. The second is that of the Union. Now, we all heard Jimmy Hoffa, right? Ever heard Jimmy Hoffa before? So he is running one of the most corrupt unions at this point, the Teamsters Union. And what he was doing is he was really pissing off the Kennedy bros because he was always doing insurance fraud and giving all kinds of construction deals to all kinds of shady players. If any of y'all have ever been to LA, that whole skyline was all built during the time of Jimmy Hoffa, and he had all of those contracts under his thumb. Now, the third is that of the Mafia, and that's what we're going to dive deep into because that is the connection of New Orleans. And I'm going to bring up some of these other players as well. Now, I mentioned Carlos Marcello, okay? So Carlos Marcello, he really butted head with the Kennedys too. But before we get to why he butts heads with the Kennedys, let's talk a little bit about his background, okay? So he comes over here as a little kid, 1-year-old, I say little kid, a baby, 1910, and comes here from Sicily, and he progresses, okay? So his family worked in the French market, selling vegetables and goods. Around the 1930s, that's when he hooks up with a little girl. Now, the girl, kind of just random, is the daughter of an underboss here, Frank Todaro. And Frank Todaro, his future father-in-law, takes him under the wing and kind of starts letting him hang out with the gangs. Now, it's at this time, Frank Costello, who's up north, New York, he's running the mob there. He makes good friends with our senator, Huey Long. And he's like, Huey, look, I got all these slot machines. Why don't you bring them down to New Orleans? New Orleans is shady as shit. They'll belong there in the bars. You'll love it. And Huey Long's like, I got just the guys for that. Huey Long, a corrupt senator, he was a governor at the time. He had friends with all the mobs. So he's like, you know what? I got this guy, Frank Costello. Let's do it. Carlos Marcello, at this time this conversation takes place, he started a pinball machine company with his brothers. So he is putting pinball machines in every single bar in the French Quarter and outside in every single direction. The second the slot machines hit here in New Orleans in the mid-1930s, he strong arms any bartender or bar owner that had his pinball machine. He's like, oh, if you want this shit, you better have this slot machine. Oh, you don't? They would beat the shit out of him. So they forced every single establishment to have this. This helped Carlos Marcello gain power when it came to illegal gambling. So much so that in 1947, when they finally shipped the current mob boss back to Sicily, they deport him. He didn't have any passports. That's when Carlos Marcello takes over. And he becomes more and more powerful from this whole slot machine empire that he had. Now, bring the Kennedys back in. Bobby Kennedy, as a young lawyer in the late 1950s, he was tasked as being head lawyer of the McClellan Committee. Now, if you haven't heard, the McClellan Committee is one of the first big Senate committees to go after the mafia here in the United States for illegal gambling. Bobby Kennedy put all these mob bosses on the stand. Carlos Marcello is one of the mob bosses, and Carlos Marcello did not like answering any of little Bobby's questions. The only thing he would ever give Bobby Kennedy in a hearing is his first and last name. This pissed Bobby Kennedy off, and we all see this in the movies. I'm going to plead the fifth. I'm not going to say anything to incriminate me or my family. This pissed him off so much that when he became an attorney general in 1960, Bobby Kennedy's got some fucking power now. He's like, oh, that fucking Carlos Marcello guy? I remember all the shit that he did. In 1961, Bobby Kennedy and some federal agents will travel down here, kidnap our mob boss at the immigration center, and dump him in Guatemala. So, why do you think of Guatemala? Well, our mob boss, Carlos Marcello, never had a U.S. citizenship, all right? He was always out, and Bobby Kennedy knew he had a fake passport. And in his passport, it said that his family was from Guatemala. He's like, if that's where you say you're from, eat shit. Dumps Carlos Marcello in the jungles of Guatemala. It will take him a month to get back here to the States. But the second Carlos Marcello shows up back here, he always venged the kidnapping that existed and told anybody that would listen to him, I'm gonna kill those motherfucking Kennedy boys one day. If you cut the head off of that dog, its little tail's gonna stop wagging, watch. So all of these things will start festering up in the early 1960s. Now it's very interesting about this tale. All of these other things are going on. The CIA, Jimmy Hoffa. 1963, Jimmy Hoffa and his then attorney will meet in the Royal Hotel, which is now the Omni Royal Hotel. It's where Zach jumped off the roof where we did our first long story. But Carlos Marcello and Jimmy Hoffa and his lawyer will meet on the first floor twice. Once February of 1963 and the second August of 1963 on that first floor. Now the second meeting, it is said, we don't have any witnesses till this day, but a big briefcase exchanges hands. We don't know what was in that briefcase. Money, do not know. Now, another big element that is very interesting in regards to this story is Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald grows up right here in the French Quarter. He lived 3 blocks away from where we are during this time with his mother. Lee Harvey's whole family, his aunt, his uncle, his mother, all worked for who? Doing what? Carlos Marcello, running book numbers, illegal gambling numbers here in the French Quarter. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald will also be spotted in Carlos Marcello's hotel, which is the Town and County Hotel. It's about 2 miles in this direction during 1963. Now, kind of step it really up, right? So Lee Harvey, the guy who pulls the trigger here in Dallas in 1963. Jack Ruby, who will kill Lee Harvey Oswald 2 days later after the Kennedy assassination. Jack Ruby is last spotted here in New Orleans on Bourbon Street, Halloween night, hanging out with who? Carlos Marcello's brothers. And all of these things will lead 1969 to have the Kennedy assassination trial here. Now, in 1965, there was a Warren Commission put out. And the Warren Commission, if you know anything about it, it was basically the government saying, hey, it was Lee Harvey. He had no friends. He did it all by himself. And there was a guy named Jim Garrison. Okay, if anybody's ever seen the movie JFK, it's played by Kevin Costner. And Jim Garrison will go after a guy named Clay Shaw, right? Clay Shaw is played by Tommy Lee Jones in that movie. But Clay Shaw was a businessman here in New Orleans that had big connections with who? The mafia and the CIA. And till this day, we all know that maybe Lee Harvey didn't work alone. Now, the reason I brought up these other 2 assassinations, the Kennedy assassination, Archduke Ferdinand, it's one of those kind of questions that we ask to this day. What if Kennedy wasn't assassinated? What if he served out 2 terms? What would our lives be like? What would take place? And just hopefully I can leave everybody with a little food for thought as they walk away from this tour tonight. What questions do you have for me? None. Come on, give me some. Everybody good? Nothing? Well, my friends, if you don't have...
Where Lee Oswald lived?
Yeah, so he lived right, so I should have pointed out to everybody. So right in between where we did the upstairs lounge and the Walgreens where we turned on the hotel, he lived with his mother right in that alley by Canal Street on the 2nd floor.
So whatever happened to the Marcello guy?
So Carlos Marcello will pass away in 1992. He dies right here. He's buried in Metairie. His family still exists here to this day. The mafia tails off at the time of his death. In the late 1980s, that's when he becomes ill. Now, what's very interesting about a mafia, like I mentioned, we don't have any commissions. So this guy ran New Orleans with an iron fist. And he was very smart mob boss in the sense that he made friends with Sam Giancana from Chicago or the other mob bosses. Everybody was his friend. they love coming down here, and he'd always, you know, bring them around to all the restaurants and bars that he owned here in the French Quarter and surrounding areas. So really, really smart, powerful dude. You know, it's also said that Jimmy Hoffa is quoted after the Kennedy assassination a week later, talking to his attorney saying, "Damn, them boys south pulled it off." Don't know again what he was referring to. Still lots of mystery in regards to this assassination and, you know, the ties of New Orleans. And but again, the government, it's all still coming out that they have documents, all that stuff. It's still really crazy. Yes, sir.
Any other famous cases that come out of here? More
Don't know specifically which ones. There are countless ones. I mean, this is you know, the biggest, you know, Supreme Court building in the South right here. So, yep. Don't know. I'll have to look that up.
Do you say the mafia is still pretty prevalent?
No. So, okay. So, very good question. She asked something about the mafia. So, currently, it is said that there are around 10,000 made men here in the country. The mafia lost lots of its power recently once illegal gambling started becoming internet gambling. When you study the mafia and what they're doing today, it's a lot of credit card fraud. It's not what the power they had back. And basically, Donnie Brasco and Rico will kill it in the early 1980s. Basically, the mafia is just gutted during that time. It's still around, but when you, if anybody's been to the Las Vegas Mob Museum, anybody? The Las Vegas Mob Museum is phenomenal. It's a very new museum. It's been open for about 5 years, but it does it chronologically. When you walk into the first floor, it's New Orleans. I was like, oh shit, this is perfect. They've followed history. And then you go into New York, Chicago, they break down every element, but the end of the museum is now all the cartels. So the Mexican cartels are the new mafia in regards to the power and the amount of money they're making. So it kind of finishes with them, and it makes perfect sense.
He did a Prohibition tour for his birthday last year in Chicago.
Yes.
And the guy was like, we still see mob guys come into
Yeah.
bars. And
Yeah, it still exists.
they're-
Yeah, there's just, don't know the power, you know, the power, or there's no names in regards to like down here who's running what. It's funny you said prohibition. Prohibition doesn't exist here in New Orleans. All of our all of our police and the government, they're like, nah, fuck it. So anyway, pretty interesting. A lot of people came here to drink, huh?
They didn't abide by them.
Not really. It basically, it doesn't even show up in any of my history books.
Oh, wow.
Nope.
There was some video released recently to where it kind of shows that it might have been somebody else that shot him from like in the car. Even his wife might
Yeah.
have been in on it.
All of it, dude.
Driving.
There's so much
Yeah.
shady
His
shit.
His wife shot him once, and it made it look like it was from the thing.
There's so much shady
And all
shit,
the
yeah.
documents are like blacked out.
I know.
So much shit blacked
So
out.
I don't know if y'all paid attention to the news recently, but you know, Biden administration, Trump, all the recent administrations are getting flack because it's past this deadline of putting out all these documents, and the government is still saying, "F no, we're not doing that," which kind of leads a lot of people to believe that these were these other entities that were, you know,
Killed him from inside
yeah,
the car.
yeah. So
And you said that the mob was in charge of legal gambling, but it seems like there's legal gambling here now, right? So
again, it was one of those things. Yeah. So back in the day.
right.
Yeah, so, and again, our city, the guys, the mob, Frank Costello was super smart because he knew how lackadaisical our laws were. Being a big port city, you know, like New York, we have all these underworld elements, and we knew we could never just say, hey, none of this completely be illegal ever, or illegal. It was one of those kind of things, to where it has to exist. If you shut any of this shady shit down to this day, all this debauchery, our city goes away, you know? Everybody good? This is a great group. I had such a blast tonight. That concludes my tour, and I want to thank everybody for y'all's amazing attention. Both groups. Everybody's so nice. Thank you so much. Awesome. Sweet. Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Butch, David, for coming. I appreciate it. They hear me do these stories. Well, this is new. Y'all haven't heard these stories. So anyway, if y'all ever do return. So I'm going to break down some gifts. I'm going to tell everybody a little bit about what we're going to do. So gratuity is always appreciated at the end of these tours. But beyond gratuity, it helps out me and my little project, the Most Talia. And we're going to compete with these other businesses. Hopefully I can hire new guides.
Thank you so much. Just your attitude and rise. Oh, we can be more.